pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Doler, could we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Wise.
Here.
Mr. Irwin.
Present.
Mrs. Killian.
Here.
Mrs. Lohr.
Here.
Ms. Lauer.
Here.
Dr. Powers. Ms. Scott.
Here. Thank you. Our vision is working together with our community. We inspire our students to discover their talents and rise to their greatest potential. Our mission is building on the strengths of our diverse community. We create an engaging, comprehensive educational environment that supports the growth of lifelong learners. Now it is time for the first call for citizens' comments. Please comment on agenda items only. You're limited to 5 minutes. Please state your name. New business, Superintendent Hayward.
And I'm going to turn that over to Director of Human Resources, Michael Cox.
President Lauer, Superintendent Hayward, members of the Board of Trustees, I stand in front of you this evening to bring forth a resolution for a retention coding stipend for the employees. Each of the amounts listed within the resolution states for each class based off of service, it would be very similar to our last stipend. We would pay this by the end of May. Take any questions?
We have a first, a second, and questions.
Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Mrs. White moved to approve. Mrs. Scott seconded that. Are there any questions or comments? Other than hooray? Say hooray.
I'll just to clarify, we're using some of our ESSER funding from this, and that comes from the federal stimulus, is that correct?
It is, and each one of those have to be summarized for each job class and what has taken place between last year and March now. And we'll summarize that and have submitted it to the IDOE.
Okay, thank you.
I think just to add, officially that would be coming out of SR2 dollars.
ESSER 2, got it, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Doler, could I have a roll call?
Mrs. Wise.
Yes.
Mr. Irwin.
Aye.
Mrs. Killian.
Aye.
Mrs. Lohr.
Aye.
Ms. Lauer.
Aye.
Dr. Powers. Ms. Scott.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Valadevich, regarding the latchkey program.
Good evening, Dr. Hayworth, President Lauer, members of the School Board of Trustees. Tonight I would like to recommend that the latchkey bid be awarded to the Family Y of Eagle County. In their bid, the Family Y has partnered with both KZ and Camp Navigate to create a wonderful example of collaboration within the county. The bid does allow for childcare to be made available to our students before and after school. Although this school year has been challenging, Family Y has demonstrated tremendous growth in the program over the last several years. We are excited that both KZ and Camp Navigate have partnered with the Family Y and will provide services for specific schools within proximity of their sites. This will be a 2-year contract, as it has been historically. At this time, I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Mrs. Killian made a motion to approve, and Mr. Irwin seconded that. And now, any comments or questions?
I have a question. I'm just looking through the terms of the agreement. How does this shake out for folks paying for their students to participate? And how does a student qualify to maybe get free access to that?
Yeah, there's scholarships offered. I think you probably read that in the contract.
Mhm.
And I believe there's 32 scholarships offered. It's a need-based system that they have. And I will tell you, the Y goes above and beyond making sure that the payments are scalable. And we do have a representative from the Y here tonight, that the payments are scalable for members of the community. They just go above and beyond to make sure that that happens.
How many kids do we usually have that participate in this?
Well, this has been an odd year, but the Y has taken it to new heights. Please don't hold me to the number, but if my memory serves me, prior to the Y taking over, we were in the range of about 150 students, and they were serving close to 600 students. So they have done a tremendous job promoting growth in the program.
Thank you.
I have a question then. The Family Y collaborated with Casey and Camp Navigate prior to this year.
Good question, Mrs. Lauer. Last year, they did collaborate with Casey. This is the first year collaborating with Camp Navigate.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Irwin?
Aye.
Mrs. Killian?
Aye.
Mrs. Lohr?
Aye.
Ms. Lauer?
Aye.
Ms. Scott?
Now we have a second call for citizen comments.
Good evening. President Lauer, members of our school board, Superintendent Hayward and his staff. My name is Dwayne Malone. I am a lifelong resident of Vigo County. I have been blessed to wear several hats in our community. One as a pastor, presently as an employee of our school system, as a juvenile liaison, and a 6th grade basketball coach at Woodrow Wilson Middle School, where we won the Vigo County Championship this year. So that was a great honor. But tonight I'm here as an advocate, a member of Citizens of Actions. We are an advocate group working to eliminate biases that lead to racism and discrimination in education, employment, economic development, and criminal justice in Vigo County. I'm here tonight to applaud and support the efforts taken in the direction of Dr. Hayward to hire and sustain a more diverse people of color within the workforce of Vigo County School Corporation. During the school board's March meeting, we were encouraged to hear our Human Resource Director, Mr. Cox's presentation. It was good to see the statistical data on new staff and employee group counts. Vigo County has approximately 1,043 teachers, with less than 1% of those being African American teachers. His recruitment plan to recruit teachers of color at historical black colleges and universities such as Tennessee State, Kentucky State, Central State, and I believe it's Howell Stall State University, while not overlooking our local talent pool here in Vigo County. When presented during the March meeting, the engagement of school board members to ask if a video could be created to add to the recruitment efforts online was also very pleasurable for us to hear. We are ones that believe, as far as the type of recruitment needs to be done, it kind of reminds us of what our military done with Uncle Sam back in the 70s as far as saying, you know, we want you in the U.S. Army, or we want you here in the Vigo County School Corporation to work for us. Citizens of Action was also elated to hear the hiring of a new Diversity, Civility, and International Exchange Director, Mr. Matthew McClendon. The forming of Mr. McClendon's Planning Committee, professional development training for staff, and cultural awareness and biases, his climate surveys, and development of a student-led diversity committee in each school is a great start for new beginnings here in Vigo County. COA will continue to work with school administrators and teachers to support COA's initiative. I have them here with me. I don't know if you can receive a copy of these due to COVID, but I have them here if you would like me to pass them out. Okay. I have some more if needed. Our initiative is developing a diverse workforce, reduce suspension and expulsion rates of African American students in Vigo County school system, apply the truths of African American history into our school curriculum, and to continue developing school environments that are healthy and productive for all students to achieve. Again, Citizens of Action would like to thank the leadership of Dr. Hayward and his staff for the vision to create a school system conducive for all students to learn and develop it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hayward, the board members? I'll go first, Dr. Hayward.
I do not have anything.
Okay. Anybody else, other members of the board? I got two notices regarding the required, two of our staff members have completed the required courses for the Indiana ASBO Voluntary Certification Program, Brandy Wolfley and Diane Haynes. So congratulations to them. And also got a nice note with an original painting on the front side of it. And this is from Booker T. Washington and signed by all the staff members saying thank you for the luncheon. And it was specifically regarding a Wise Pies luncheon. So I could throw that in there too. But I think all of the members of the board have received thanks from teachers throughout the school corporation for the luncheon. And so I think it was certainly well-deserved, well-earned, and I'm pleased that we were able to follow through with that. Any other comments from the board members?
I have a comment or question. As we're moving closer to our high school graduations at Holman Center, I'm getting asked by parents and guardians, is the board going to be handing out the diplomas as we've done in the past? Because it's like, you know, we know they're kids and that's something that we've done, but I didn't know if that's something we had talked about changing. But if anyone has an answer to that, or is it still
I'll
evolving?
have to get back to you.
That's fine.
Okay, any committee reports specifically? All right, our future meeting is Monday. It will be a business meeting, May the 24th, right here, 6 o'clock.
That's also an important date in the Irwin household. That's Henry's second birthday.
Oh, all right.
Now, call the work session before we're going.
Yes. Go right back and call the work session to order.
Sure. Mrs. Wise,
Present.
Mr. Irwin,
Present.
Mrs. Killian,
Present.
Mrs. Lohr,
Here.
Miss Lauer,
Present.
Miss Scott.
Here.
Thank you. And please address us, Mrs. Wilson.
Thank you. President Lauer, Superintendent Hayward, members of the Board of School Trustees. In response to the COVID pandemic, Congress enacted the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, on March 27, 2020. This emergency funding afforded us the opportunity to accelerate our one-to-one initiative, providing us approximately $3.6 million to address remote and virtual learning. On December 27, 2020, a second stimulus and COVID relief funding stream was authorized as part of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. This funding, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 2, otherwise known as SR2, expands on the priorities of CARES funds, providing funds to address activities allowed under CARES, but also providing funds to mitigate virus transmission and other health hazards, improve air quality in our schools, and address learning loss by implementing evidence-based activities to meet the comprehensive needs of our students. Our initial allocation under SR2 is $13.5 million, and this funding will be available to us through December of 2023. Our initial application was granted approval last week, and I'll be addressing that plan this evening. Keep in mind that we have been notified of our planning allocation for the third round of relief funding, or SR3. The school corporation's allocation for SR3, as you know, is approximately $30 million. The grant portal for SR3 funding has not been opened by the IDOE, and we are still receiving guidance and reviewing that guidance on those funds, so I won't be addressing the use of those SR3 funds this evening. Initial information we've received on SR3 does indicate that its scope will be broader than CARES and SR2, and it will be available through 2024. As a team, we commit to you that we understand the magnitude of these dollars and the impact they can and will have on the long-term operation of the school corporation. As we move forward with that planning, our goal is to make sure we incorporate these federal dollars into the ongoing strategic plan for the betterment of the school corporation as a whole. With that said, let's look at SR2 more closely. SR2, like CARES funding, comes to us via the Indiana Department of Education and focuses on 4 key priorities: accelerated learning, supporting educators, sustainable innovation, and updating technology and other infrastructure. As the administrative team looks at a strategic plan to allocate these dollars appropriately, it's important to consider and discuss how we weave these federal dollars into our existing budget structure and strategic plan. Our primary goals are to provide quality educational programming to address learning loss, provide necessary facility improvements to ensure the health of students and staff, and to address and improve the educational interaction between students and classroom instructors with improved educational technology and programming. It's imperative that we look at current education and operations funds budgets, general obligation bond dollars available, and these relief dollars, and target them to provide long-term sustainable improvements. CARES dollars, as you know, were used to accelerate the rollout of Chromebooks and provide virtual instruction licensing and courseware. As we look at SR2 dollars and address the first priority of SR2 funding, accelerated learning, we plan on continuing that initiative by using SR2 funds to reimburse ourselves for Chromebooks that were purchased from general obligation bond proceeds, and also pay for licensing for our Canvas platform in the future. To address learning loss, Dr. Goler, Dr. Fenton, and Dr. Mason have been engaged in the development of after-school tutoring programs and enhanced summer school opportunities for students. Through these efforts, transportation will be provided, and meals will be served to those in attendance. You've heard Dr. Balatevich and others discuss social emotional learning concerns, and we've targeted SR2 dollars to provide light speed and stop-it licensing to assist our counselors. Without SR2 funds, these costs would be covered with education fund dollars we did not anticipate spending in these in these areas prior to the pandemic. The second priority of SR2 funding is supporting educators. Professional development opportunities focused on social emotional learning, civility and inclusion training, and other initiatives will be conducted. These opportunities will help us attract and maintain quality staff members. The cost of purchasing PPE and disinfecting supplies to keep schools in session is an allowable cost under SR2, and we will exercise our right to pay ourselves back for those items we purchase out of our SR2 allocation. Repayment of our operations fund will help us maintain a healthy cash balance moving forward. Staff stipends approved this evening were budgeted within SR2 to acknowledge additional duties performed and necessary training completed by staff during the pandemic. Our methods of teaching and reaching students has changed, and providing classroom materials is another option with SR funding. We will continue to investigate other opportunities to provide support to our educators across the district. Sustainable innovation, the third priority under SR2, is perhaps the area that benefits us most as we look to the future. We now have a means to explore, develop, and implement a variety of methods to provide instruction. We will use SR2 to provide another year of virtual school courseware while we engage in developing our own commercial virtual academy. We can investigate flex school and early college and dual credit opportunities for our students, implementing these pathways with staff dedicated strictly to this goal. As Mr. Riley discusses our strategic plan this evening, I'm sure you will hear more about these opportunities. And finally, we have incorporated into the SR2 budget dollars to address HVAC work in several of our facilities. SR guidelines target air quality improvements. As you know, we have a substantial budget set aside in this area, so this is another place that we can repurpose both operations fund and general obligation bond dollars. Moving our HVAC improvement project contract that we recently approved to SR frees up bond dollars for other uses, and ongoing maintenance costs funded through the operations fund budget are reduced. We plan on paying ourselves back for bus hotspots that were purchased, and we've allocated funds to provide network upgrades through the expansion of internet access points within our schools. Without SR2 funds, these projects would have provided additional stress to our operations budget or our GO fund budget, or we would have had to defer them indefinitely. Before I close, I'd like to touch on a couple of points to remember. I've indicated areas tonight that we will see savings as a result of the use of SR2 funds. Some of these savings will be realized within our ongoing education and operations fund budgets. It was our intention to use these one-time funds to assist with the corporation's strategic plan goal of fiscal responsibility. We remain focused on that goal. Savings generated within these funds could be used to reduce reliance on operating referendum fund in future years and achieving and maintaining a strong cash balance. We will reap the benefit of reduced maintenance costs within the operations fund as a result of the repurposing of bond dollars. Upgrades to equipment through bond funds will reduce long-term, ongoing maintenance costs in Mr. Long's operations budget, which in turn could impact the cash balance. I've discussed general obligation bond savings opportunities also. It's important to understand that our general obligation bond dollars are to be used for capital expenditures, for those items that are long-lasting, durable assets of the corporation. General obligation bond savings cannot be used to support salaries, supplies, utility costs, etc. We can and will continue to repurpose GO bond dollars to accelerate the completion of much-needed building improvements and address the equipment needs of the schools. These one-time SR2 funds, albeit restricted in their use, offer us the limited opportunity to invest more now to benefit the long-term needs of the corporation. In closing, the SR2 budget is still evolving. Although we've developed the framework for those funds, we have much work ahead. We will continue updating the board, and public as we move forward with SR2 and 3 planning in an effort to provide transparency throughout the funding timeline. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are light speed and stop it ongoing now? Don't we,
I believe Mr. Valetevich is currently using light speed, and we're looking at stop it.
right,
We're planning for the implementation of that.
that's what I thought. We were able to, with SR2 funds, I believe, and the city and the county and joint, set up 83 hotspots,
That was with a year's grant.
the year's grant.
That was separate apart from the MSR dollars.
Okay, so it was separate from the SR2.
The question that I would pose to the board is our philosophy correct? Is it the right one? Our philosophy is, what are those things that fall under SR2 that we have already paid for since the beginning of COVID? Is our philosophy correct in going back and basically paying ourselves back for those costs approved under SR2 that would then free up educational, operational expenses that would have fewer strings attached to them? Is our philosophy correct in the approach that we are taking with understanding bond projects, of which bond dollars spent would now qualify under SR2, therefore reimbursing ourselves for those bond dollars spent and then spending them on other bond-like projects? Again, as you've heard Donna say, those cannot be spent in salary.
And some of the items that we're looking at reimbursing ourselves for, those, the purchase of PPE and those types of things. We initially had earmarked that to make a claim to FEMA. The original application was denied through FEMA. The SR2 allocation and SR3 go back to a funding date in March of 2020, just as CARES did. So those are eligible and allowable expenses under SR2 that we would like to recover on our behalf, because they were very above and beyond the norm. We purchased probably $300,000 to $400,000 in PPE and had increased costs related to disinfectant and those types of things. As you can remember, the pipeline to get those supplies was quite congested when COVID started.
We have buses all around the county as hotspots for Wi-Fi, and so does it cover some of the costs that we incurred there also?
That would be our request, that we would like to do that. We did have some funds donated for those, and obviously those donations would still apply for hotspots, but we would like to pay ourselves for those items outside of those donations. Purchase of hotspots was from our funds was in excess of $137,000.
I guess, Dr. Hayworth, you posed a question to the board about is it the right strategy? And something that Donna said really struck me, that taking this path that was just described to us could make it so that another operating referendum is not needed. As we talk about building new buildings, remodeling, through community conversations, what we're going to do there, the dropping off of an operating referendum could make that more doable. So at least from my opinion, again, I'm just one board member, I think you guys have the right idea, and I'm always on board with financial responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I would also add that I think that addressing these things is in keeping with the spirit of the law as it was passed by the federal government. So we have kind of a duty, in my opinion, to address those things because they were outliers for us, expenses that we weren't planning to have. So I think it's absolutely appropriate that we do that. And I
comments, questions from board members?
Donna, I would just like to thank you for your thorough explanation. For someone new to the board and to our financials of our corporation, I really appreciate the time that you take to explain. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Cloutier.
Could I just ask one question, and this may be more applicable to this third round of funding that's coming down, but I mean, as we're looking at this HVAC and the infrastructure stuff, how much of that we can apply to our Otter Creek renovation? I know we've talked about that before, or what kind of your thought is on how we would approach that?
I think the Otter Creek, as you know, we did sell bonds last week for Otter Creek. I think that project is covered, but I think that as we look past Otter Creek, we do have some other building concerns that could be targeted at a portion of the SRT funding.
I think it applies to a much larger discussion on total facilities. We have a conversation going right now in regards to the high school facilities. But literally every one of our buildings, there will probably be some approach that ESSER dollars could be used for, from air quality to replacing carpet with tiles. And so I think it's a question that we're going to have to come back and ask you as the board, once we move through some more community meetings, how do we use those ESSER dollars? What, we're going to have to attack reading loss, we're going to have to attack those things that again are in the spirit of SR3, but SR3 is written that would allow us to do some infrastructure things. And so do you spend those dollars at an elementary level or at a middle school level, thinking that you're going to address some bigger needs through a high school project? If you don't believe there's going to be a high school project, you then go and use those ESSER dollars to attack much needed renovation in the high schools. So I think we're trying to, we have till 2024, September of 2024 to account for those dollars. And I think in our conversation, what we're wanting to hear is what our community would like for us to do and ultimately what the board authorizes us to do.
So I guess the question I have, the September 2024 date that you just mentioned, does the work have to be completed by then, or just the dollars have to be allocated by then?
I wouldn't want to speak to that yet until we get
Closer.
The portal for SR3 is not open until May 16th.
That's right, Donna said. I apologize, sorry.
I can tell you on SR2, you can encumber the funds through September of '23, and they have to be liquidated by December of '23. So if SR3 follows that, we have to abide by December. Type of little theater.
There are timelines
Thank you.
followed. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Thank you. Mr. Riley, please, future considerations for the strategic plan.
President Lauer, Dr. Hayworth, members of the board, I want to thank you for your time this evening. Tonight I'm going to give a presentation on 3 items that I would like the board to discuss and consider adding to the strategic plan. I want to pause here and just mention how remarkable it is that it is our perspective as an administration that we have the bandwidth to add to a relatively new strategic plan, one that is just more than 1 year old. The advances we have made under this plan in quick time allows us to consider new challenges today. Think for a moment about our technology plan, for instance. A 4-year plan to provide devices to every teaching staff member and student was realized in under 1 year. COVID necessitated the acceleration of that plan, and our staff responded with professional development and impressive adaptation to include these new tools. I see the benefits in our students, my own student at home, who now have the confidence to use technology for educational purposes. I think we're all interested in seeing how that confidence grows. I want to point out something out about that technology plan and how it's impacted our children, and it has to do with that word, confidence. I think it's fair to say that if a student is not confident, if they have no feeling of self-assurance, it is difficult for them to learn. It's the reason why studies show that when a school administrator or teacher greets a student at the door, academic engagement can increase up to 20 percentage points. If a student isn't ready to learn, if they aren't interested, engaged, or confident, it's nearly impossible for a teacher to develop them. So where am I going with this? Why is now the time to revisit the strategic plan? Well, we experienced a once-in-a-lifetime event. I think it's important to recognize that the COVID-19 pandemic will likely be the defining world event for everyone who lived through it, me, you, our students. It's changed me. What I'm getting at is that the size of this moment is enormous. We have learning loss to address. We have trauma to address. The state of Indiana has created a funding category you just heard Mrs. Wilson talk about called sustainable innovation. So if all we do to come out of COVID is to look backwards, what do we need to revisit? And not forwards. How can we come out stronger? We will have done ourselves a disservice. Think for a moment why we have learning loss to address. It's not because teachers didn't cover the content. They did. It's not because students didn't have opportunities to engage. They did, in person, remotely, and through a new learning management system. It's because perhaps our students have lost out on some other types of engagement, something that sparks them. I do think that one thing that COVID has taken away from us over the last year is the joy. The little things our teachers do to spark individual students' imaginations and to get to know them personally. Those things were harder this year. In some instances, they couldn't happen. So if that's the magic ingredient, if the thing that makes school successful is making it welcoming and highly engaging, why wouldn't we devote this historic moment to make sure our students have more of those things than they did before the pandemic? I'm not saying that we shouldn't address learning loss through remediation, but why wouldn't we do something to make school a more engaging place, to create more confident and ultimately more successful students? I think this quote from a recent article in Edutopia speaks to the opportunity we have as a school corporation as we come away from COVID-19. Can we, should we, in the aftermath of the clarifying events of the last year, find the will to challenge the testing regime, return some agency to both our teachers and students, bring the science of learning into our classrooms, and honor all children with challenging, engaging work that ushers in a new, better, fairer era in education. Hold that last part in your minds. What we're trying to do first and foremost is usher a new, better, fairer era in education. We're trying to do that at a time that is a critical juncture for our school corporation. It's difficult to dream about ushering a new, better, fairer era when population and as a result funding is declining. It's tough to dream about Olympic gold in the 50-meter freestyle when treading water seems like a monumental task. We're not alone in this. 4 out of every 5 Indiana school districts are losing enrollment. However, it's our reality. A couple months ago, we did our first of what will be an annual family survey. In that survey, families longed for more individual student connections and new programming to inspire students who may fall through the cracks. What we have here is several items. One, we need to offer more ways for our students to gain confidence through new educational opportunities. Opportunities that engage them, light a fire. Two, we need to stabilize our enrollment. We need to attract and retain students. And three, we need to realize that these two items are very much related. In order to devote resources, our enrollment and funding need stabilization. However, in order to stabilize enrollment, we need the resources to offer new ways for our students to engage. I mentioned earlier that COVID will be a once-in-a-lifetime event for us. The truth is our world and school corporation has been through many big events. 9/11, the housing bubble in the mid to late 2000s. If you hear us here locally when Pfizer announced it was leaving town in 2008. The reality is that enrollment has dropped steadily since 1983. A demographer expects our enrollment to level off at 13,000 in the next 9 years. That means over a 47-year period, our school corporation will realize a loss of 5,139 students. To put that into perspective, if we would have not experienced any decline in enrollment since 1983, we would have an additional $34 million each year in our education fund. I put that orange box there, and it looks like hopping from computer to computer has changed some of the format, but to show the gap between what we had in 1983 and now. So what are we doing to fight back? What are we doing to reject the idea that all our enrollment can do is go down? We cannot continue to rely only on the state's per pupil funding for our current group of local students if we want any sort of vision for the future that extends beyond what we already do. We have to position ourselves for the future, not just for the stability of our school corporation and not just to attract and retain students. It's connected, but we must provide ways for our students to meaningfully engage and thrive. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about these three items this evening, and they're items I believe warrants board consideration for the strategic plan. They are, number one, developing a flex school to be placed on the grounds of the next elementary school to be consolidated. Number two, a FIGHT, that stands for Fabrication, Innovation, Technology, and Engineering campus, to engage students with a passion for taking ideas from concept to design to creation. And three, a statewide commercial online school that delivers a better online education and allows us to enroll students outside of our county using the profit to protect and grow our brick and mortar schools. So first, a flex school. A flex school can increase engagement with our existing students and welcome more to our corporation. The goal behind this would be to engage our students with focused, individualized attention and attract new students to use our educational services. It would serve primarily three different audiences. One, our own students. This would be a place where we can have monthly field trips for students, for hands-on activities. We could serve religious homeschool networks by providing standards-based activities and instruction to supplement homeschoolers. And we could also serve other homeschool networks, those who want deeper learning to satisfy homeschool families who want challenging curriculums. So this could be a hub for the NEED experience and STEM programming and outreach. It could be a place where we have blended learning support, staff available to assist all learners. It would be a place where we could develop flex credit. This would be credit for high schoolers who maybe want to design a course for credit based on their experiences outside of the classroom, with somebody to guide them through that. Also a place where we could have a launch pad for externships. A flex school could operate until 8 p.m. with mentorship, tutoring, after-school care, evening food service, and adult education courses. it could truly be a flexible place that we're not beholden to an 8 to 3 time to serve more students. Some operational considerations to think about here. One, we don't foresee any increase in administration through this program. We would use current administrators to no principal. There's the potential to increase enrollment through a flexibility waiver program that the state has recently made available, focusing less on days and more on minutes, less on seat time. We could retain students by offering that engagement and depth that we're talking about. How many times have we heard we don't get enough field trips? What if we had a place that could help students spark their imagination, especially as it relates to STEM activities? I also see potential partnerships with area colleges and youth-serving organizations. So the next steps for a program like this, if we are interested, is to visit existing models. There are two I have in mind. One in Hilliard, Ohio, called the Innovation Campus, and the second in Elkhart, Indiana, called the Ethos Science Center. We would want to investigate partnerships with area colleges and youth-serving organizations, as well as with homeschool networks, while developing field trip programming with curriculum team to enrich our current standards. The second program I want to talk about is a FIGHT Center, Fabrication, Innovation, Technology, and Engineering. So in partnership with area colleges and trade unions, what if we developed a state-of-the-art campus for student engagement and workforce development? This would serve our own students, especially high school students involved in classes where they create from start to finish, from design to concept. It could serve our community. It could offer a makerspace in our community. Could forge potential partnerships with somebody like Launch Terre Haute for an incubator here in town, but also our trade unions, training space for them. This could also be a space used by higher ed for entrepreneurship programs and skill development. We'd want to focus on any class that takes design to fabrication, welding, robotics, auto mechanics, with stations for other fight skills classes. Think of this as a place where a student might go half the day and then be bused back to their school for the second half. We would want to focus on flexible space. We're in the process of developing regional goals for workforce development. We want to be ready to respond to those goals. Think of this not just as a school building, but a multi-use center for multiple audiences. A place like this has the potential to retain students by offering clear paths to careers and engaging hands-on activities. It would be unique in the area, able to attract students from Wabash Valley schools. This is an excellent center for co-design, for partnerships that benefit everybody through public, private, and higher ed. And we would also be able to condense some things that we have happening in each school in one place to make better use of corporation-wide staff. So there are 3 existing models we'd want to take a visit to: Clarksville, Indiana, Indianapolis, and Elkhart. We want to talk with area colleges and trade unions, and then investigate partnerships with our local workforce folks, Chamber of Commerce, Launch Terre Haute, Economic Development. The third project I'll go into a little bit more depth in. This is a commercial online school. And we say commercial online school because it is different than VVSA. When we developed VVSA 2 years ago, it was designed as a life vest. It was designed as a tool in the toolbox for principals. An option for students who didn't fit in to an existing brick and mortar setting. COVID has blown the doors off that. Now, and I'll present some data in a little bit, there is demand for this type of education. And there are school corporations across the state that are using schools like this to supplement their brick and mortar operations. So this could serve our own students, it could serve students in the area, but it could also serve students statewide. The number one operator in Indiana is based in Florida. What if we built something here that could serve Indiana students a little better? It would focus heavily on engagement and character, something I believe is left behind in current online education. Focus heavily on user experience, providing an environment that blends synchronous and asynchronous learning. And would also use our expertise. One of the things that we do very well is our curriculum is strong. We can deliver that strong curriculum in an online platform. I'd also like to think about partnering with higher ed. Some online schools partner with higher ed to offer screening classes for admittance into those schools. I think that's a partnership we can investigate here locally. So what does an online school do? One, it ends our total dependence on state funding to fuel our educational fund. We would have the ability to pay our own teachers to help develop courses, but we would need initial startup funding for instructional design, marketing, course development, and instruction. So to get this off the ground, we'd want to take a close look at Stride, formerly K-12. They operate the largest existing Indiana online schools. Investigate some partnerships with area colleges, and then create a timeline for development. One of the areas I want to focus on initially with this is elementary. A lot of online schools across the state focus on high school. I believe there is room in the market to focus on elementary. We've seen interest in our own online elementary program, and I think that could be a niche for this. So I want to go back to that enrollment side and just show the steady decline in enrollment. If we could supplement enrollment with those enrolled in an online school with statewide reach, we could begin to have a growth mentality. With the supplemental enrollment from an online school, we could have some latitude to discuss what our students need to be competitive, what our teachers need to be competitive, and what our district needs to be competitive. Now, will we reclaim the over 5,000 students that we've lost over the last 38 years? That's unlikely at first, but it's not out of the question once an online school gets going. For instance, Indiana Digital, which operates through Union MODOC, has nearly 6,000 students. Indiana Connections, over 6,000 students. The largest online schools in the state have over 16,000 students between them. As I said, many of them are operated by Stride, a for-profit organization based in Florida. Now, it's hard not to think of some of these schools as pirates of sorts. For-profit, out of state, and they take most of the ADM from the schools they partner with. For example, I believe MODOC only gets 5% of the 85% ADM that Stride receives for a virtual student. Well, I think there's a better way to do this, one that can work with our area school corporations to provide students who want a virtual option. One that can use our curriculum, one of our greatest strengths, and one that can use our teachers, another of our strengths. The interest is out there for online school. We have more than 329 Vigo County students attending one of the large statewide online schools right now. Why do I say more than 329 when that slide says 329? Well, these numbers are from the fall transfer report. If you look at a report of students who have withdrawn since, I would estimate that an additional 50 to 100 students have transferred to one of those schools in that time. It's important to know that, again, when we started VDSA 2 years ago, it was meant to be a tool. The students who enroll in statewide online schools aren't always looking for a life vest. They want, maybe even thrive in an online environment. A new commercial online school will be built with that in mind. Why? Well, even after the ups and downs of last year, our family survey showed that 3% of our families want online schooling next year. It's our understanding that the demand for an online school will not go away as COVID does. An additional benefit is that online schools can supplement the brick and mortar program. Even a school corporation like Union Modoc, who only gets 5% of the 85% ADM from Stride, can supplement their funding by nearly $2 million per year. That's a lot for a school that only has 230 students in grades 6 through 12. So what would a business plan be like for our school? Well, we would want to be Stride ourselves. We would want to build and deliver the curriculum to realize full funding. We would also want to be a good neighbor to partnering in nearby districts, offering this school as a service to students who are interested. 3% of our students want online next year, and we have the ability to provide that in our current state. But I expect that 3% is somewhat consistent for our neighbors, who may not be interested in running an online program themselves. To get to a product that competes with Stride statewide, we will need a team focused on software design, instructional design, marketing, and we will need to invest in our own teachers to create courses. At any point, if someone asked you to close your eyes and imagine your life 10 years down the road, we all want to imagine an improvement, progress. If I told you then that 10 years from now, our school corporation would be focused on exactly the same things, you'd be disappointed. You'd expect that we would be trying new initiatives to solve our biggest problems. We have work to do, change to make. COVID is certainly a part of that as we address learning loss. But the things I focused on today, a flex school, a fight center, a statewide commercial online school, they all focus on increasing engagement with students in different ways. That will be the measure of how our students are different. For the stability of our school corporation, though, if things haven't changed in 10 years, they actually have. If they haven't changed in 10 years, they've gotten worse. Once again, we're projected to lose enrollment until we hit 13,000 students in 2030. By not changing, we're actually continuing to decline. I believe that these three concepts address our future growth, and I hope you consider adding these items to the strategic plan.
So before we take questions, here's from a formula standpoint, how we would like to move forward. We would like to engage the standing committees that created the first strategic plan. So if you'll recall, in communications, there was a standing committee. If you'll recall, in curriculum instruction, there was a standing committee. In student services, there was a standing committee. We'd like to re-engage with those committees. And where these three concepts fall, we'd like to engage them into discussions in and around how do we build those pieces out. Once we were to do that, we would come back to you with those committee findings and then present those as amendments to the strategic plan. lot of work was accomplished in year one of our strategic plan, more than we ever anticipated, and that was out of necessity. Not that we are finished with student services, not that we are finished in curriculum instruction, not that we have ended our march. However, I do believe that COVID has presented us with challenges and opportunities, and we would like to seize those opportunities and not have 2030 be a year of additional school closures. Thoughts for us?
I have a question. In the flex school, you described the three target audience groups. And one of the things with the fight, you also showed the target audience group and with the outcome objective of attracting more students from Wabash Valley schools. And it's a partnership, you said, between public schools, private schools, and higher ed. Is there a reason why the private schools aren't considered as part of that flex school program, but they are with the fight?
So the private that is referenced in FIGHT is private industry, private schools.
Okay. And so that's not a group that we're considering in any of these programs?
Well, I think you could find that kind of co-design in the flex school as well. It's just not something that.
We would want them to be interested in revenue sharing if that were the case.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? I think there's so many questions and comments that we have in our heads right now, and thank you for this overview, but I'll be anxious to have the committees rejoin and have a more, have another presentation that we can dwell on this and see where it's going, because, you know, I agree with so many of your thoughts that things have got to change, and maybe COVID has reinforced that. We've had to certainly speed up our changes and innovations, and need to look to the future with a more aggressive approach, I think. So,
Yeah, we do not believe this is a year-long process. We believe this is categorized in weeks before we're back in front of you.
You know, when we talked about, when we had community meetings last month about the high school projects, there were some people who wanted the fourth high school, and they thought it would be, you know, career center, technical, that type of a high school. And I think you can accomplish a lot of that with what you were discussing with the flex school, the fight center. And I'm interested to see the full proposal and very exciting things.
Were those envisioned to be at the same place, the flex school and the fight center, or those are separate?
This would be separate. The flex school would be located at the final elementary school that will be closed at the end of next year. And I believe a fight center would need a new facility.
So
all
what's
to be
our,
developed.
I'm sorry.
Like you said, all to be developed.
I was just curious about the committees and how
Yeah, that's a good question.
Gonna have to reform organizationally, or?
No, during our original strategic planning process, we really broke the district down into departments. And what we would do is we re-engage those committees that helped us develop the strategic plan to begin with 10-year departments. And then, depending upon the fit for, let's say, the flex school, which I see that falling clearly in the curriculum instruction committee, that they would then take this idea, discuss it, tear it apart, research it, to the point where we would come back, make a recommendation of if it should move forward, and if it should move forward, what are the criteria to determine if the flex school is ultimately successful. So So I don't think there is anything organizationally that we need to do unless we find out that maybe one of these categories does not fit neatly within one of our subcommittees, and maybe they have to create a subcommittee apart from that.
So there's school corporation committees, Amy, not school board.
I got that,
Okay.
thank you.
I'm sorry.
So, Dr. Harris, you said you probably be back in front of us with more concrete information within weeks. Have you ballparked any kind of cost?
In terms of which concept?
Well,
We
you
talked
know-
about cost, yes, we have. Am I confident in any number that I would present tonight? No, I'm not.
Because we don't actually know what school we would be
Correct.
closing, so it's kind of the cart before the horse, because we don't know how that building would have to be modified. We don't know how much that would cost. So that's something I think that we would have to know before we could, delve into, because of course it's wonderful ideas, no question there, but it's just, will it work and can we afford it?
Is there an ideal timeline you would like moving forward?
Yeah, I would hope that we're back to you this summer with the recommendations from the committees and then build that timeline out. Our enrollment challenges are not slowing down, they're accelerating. We have kicked the tires on virtual school now for a very long time, and I'm to the point where, for me to think of it as a successful venture for our community, we have to get out of thinking of the local, and it's tough for us, the local virtual school, which really was developed with the hope of being able to maybe draw some from nearby counties or nearby communities. Here, what we're talking about is something that would rival Union Modoc in terms of enrollment. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to have that up and running by this time next year?
I'm really excited about the virtual school option just because as a parent, my sons have been enrolled in VBSA and we are not the typical of why we would have chose VBSA. Absolutely, my kids want to be in school traditionally. The VBSA mold has not fit their personalities and what they may need as far as a parent making that choice. So I'm really excited to see where that opportunity could go for our students.
And just a reminder, we still have a conversation that we're going to be engaged in while we're developing these pieces on our high school facilities, so I want that to escape anybody as well.
And you're just gonna be making recommendations, to amend the strategic plan. We wouldn't necessarily be approving, this is gonna happen now. The strategic plan is just a broad goal, and this is where we want to be. And everything within the strategic plan still has to be voted on again. Similar to when the strategic plan said we were gonna close elementary schools to right-size the district, we still had to vote on that. So to address, financial concerns, things like that, we can accept it into a strategic plan without actually accepting it into existence, correct?
That is correct.
I think the idea of the commercial online school is overdue. I really think that it doesn't make any sense for us to watch all of these other people get their piece of the pie. So I already can't, unless somebody has something unforeseen, I see only good things with that.
Madam President, I think that's all we have.
I think that's all we have. I see no other hands raised. Thank you, Mr. Riley. I appreciate your explanations and descriptions. Well, we will say it one